There's people being very patient.
Sorry, guys, we're just having some technical difficulties on our end. Just trying to get Marcelli in here. Okay, well, you know what? I guess it's not going to work. So I'm going to just get us started here. And again, my apologies for the delay in start. My name is Carol, and I'm going to get this webinar started. So today we have Empowering Municipal Business Relationship Managers, Efficient IT Management. This webinar is brought to you by Get in Sync, and it will be recorded today. If you have any questions, please enter them into the chat throughout the presentation, and they'll be answered at the end. And with that, I would like to introduce our speakers, Stuart Holtby and Kip Fanta. Stuart is a seasoned enterprise architect with a career rooted in technology and business strategy. He holds a master's degree in business administration from Athabasca University. He is founder of Get in Sync Strategic Management. Kip partners very closely with the Business Relationship Management Institute, along with Indixia for Professional GPS. Kip is a Master of Business Relationship Management and Knowledge Provider with the BRM Institute. And with that, I would like to welcome Stuart and Kip.
Hi, everyone. What I want to talk about today is the challenge that everyone faces within, and that's the demand for IT. And it's no surprise that we're dealing with a lot of IT requests and data coming in from all sides. And it's really hard to distinguish what's truly important. You can see this girl here. She's overwhelmed. She's trying to fit too much in her mouth. This is typical. We try to take on way too much than our group can handle. And it's really a complex task to try and figure out what to prioritize and what investments make sense and what don't. And the result is just missed opportunities. The backlog only continues to grow. It's clear without a structured approach, we'll continue to struggle. There's really two pieces of the puzzle. Meetings are actually killing innovation. Unproductive meetings, as you can see here, it's staggering, right? 57 million meetings are conducted a week. 33% of our work week is actually stuck in meetings. I think we all know that 4 hours, but it's probably on the conservative side in terms of how much time we're in meetings. The shocking thing is 11% of those are considered productive. So there's a huge waste of time, and this is where Get in Sync is designed to help. It's really to buy back that time to get you more productive in meetings and really getting great ideas and saving them from failure. So we don't want ideas to go and die. We want to be innovative. And how do we be innovative? Well, we have to validate ideas. So the question really becomes is, why do meetings fail? Because if that's where we're validating ideas and actually nurturing these, what's causing this? And actually, there's a lot of really good research done by the core science. And in fact, a fellow by the name of Evan Lapointe has studied this and just how our brains work during decision making and during meetings. The research shows that our brains fall back into this safe territory to conserve energy because we're trying to always save energy. So what makes sense is from a survival standpoint, because we're trying to conserve energy, is a serious barrier to innovation. People stick with what's comfortable, and embracing new ideas is uncomfortable. And so we end up heading into our safety cave. The challenge here is that they're surfacing the way that we think, right? So we have the big picture thinkers, and then we have the more analytical IT folks, and that's the group I'm in, the camp I'm in. So often what happens is people bring ideas to me, and I don't find them very believable. In fact, sometimes inconceivable, right? So we have that natural tendency to stop ideas through a death of 1,000 doubts. So and people have different motivations, and so if we come in with different thinkings, different reward systems, and that's what core science talks about in their deep study of the brain, we come in with different thoughts, right? So why does this all matter? Well, this really creates a perfect storm, if you will, a dangerous combination, inefficient meetings with this overwhelming amount of information, and the IT backlog just continues to grow. And then, of course, this is where we really have to work hard at validating ideas before they actually come into a meeting. So what happens is that we're fighting wanting to be innovative and open to ideas, but also wanting to stem the flow of IT demand. So how do we know if that idea is believable, inconceivable, and that kind of thing on that spectrum that we're talking about? This is where we really feel that the BRMs step up and help to understand these failures. And so that's the problems that we're trying to solve. And business relationship managers really are the ones that are helping with that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kip, who's the expert with regards to the whole business relationship management area. So Kip, on to you.
Yeah, so let's talk about business relationship management. And some of you may be very familiar with it, some of you may not. And we'll particularly talk about business relationship managers. And what is a BRM, business relationship manager? First of all, it's essential to know that a BRM is a role, and many times can be a position as well. And I was in one of those positions. And in those roles, you're playing that primary, building that relationship with this business partner, this stakeholder, this department leader on behalf of your function, on behalf of IT. And so you're really building those relationships. And if there's not a specific person called a BRM, there are people playing that role. And when we think about demand management, it's critical that you have this kind of role helping manage this conversation that we're going to be talking about today on demand. We don't want this to be just intake. Here's the intake process and managing demand. It's so much more than that. So at the core of this discussion, this role, a business relationship manager, is really helping the decision-making process. They're making sure that we're evaluating this idea. I don't want to dismiss an idea, as Stuart was talking, just because it doesn't sound right, but I also don't want to just let ideas flow right through. In my work with BRMs around the world, I'm always gently coaching them, and I'll say this: I'd be embarrassed that anyone else in IT is even looking at this idea. Meaning, I don't see any value in this idea. We have to be careful that we're just not letting things just slide right through. What are we saying about value if that's the case? And to Stuart's comment, we don't also want to say we can't do that. So we're really engaging on this idea. You need to engage. We're not saying yes right away. We're not saying no. You're driving a collaborative conversation to really make sure people are able to share their ideas, you're able to share your ideas, and we drive this wonderful conversation. And so the way in which we do this, driving to strategic things, is really key. So as a BRM, as you're seeing here, as you're having this conversation, it's all about making sure, how does this tie ultimately what you're trying to do? What is your strategy? How do we ensure that this is aligned, and converging with the municipal goals and priorities? Now, that means we're going to have to know what those are. And many times we don't know necessarily what the department strategy is or what the municipality is up to. So we need to ask. We need to engage to make sure we understand that. And we're focused on the long-term outcomes, not just on today. So as the BRM, we're really at the center of this conversation. And how you have this conversation it can make the difference between how you and your whole IT function shows up to be a little bit more strategic versus tactical. So it's such an important part of demand shaping is how this role really plays that key role. So let's take a look now a little bit more at some techniques and tools, and then I'm going to talk about them, and then we're going to actually demo and show you something real quick as this as well. So there's this idea crafting framework. What are the right questions? What are the right things for them to be thinking about even before coming to the meeting? How can I think about the objectives? How can I have a good discussion about this idea? Instead of wandering around and having one of those wasted meetings that Stuart was talking about, how can I use this framework to drive the right level conversation? We're going to look at that. The value plan then, so important, because this is all about making sure the municipalities understand value, that we're on the same page, and how we're going to measure that value. That's critical. So we're going to look at these a little bit more in detail now, starting with, again, just the general way of thinking about priming or getting ready for meetings. As Stuart said, we're wasting a lot of time. We have meetings, and it was like an hour went by, and what do we get out of this? So priming is really about, even before the meeting or right at the beginning of the meeting, you're making sure people know why they're at this meeting, and you're facilitating this as a leader. Priming helps provide the context. You're going to have shaping the discussion, you're going to align the strategies with the ideas, and ultimately then you move to the framework. And this framework then is using these statements with your business partner. Now you're going to talk about these things. And this framework basically says, how might the idea? And now I can start to think about the possibilities. I kind of brainstorm. I really explore the possibilities. I finish that line. How might this idea? And you talk about that. So that we can, and you're going to finish that statement with your business partner. You're going to do a little bit more conversation of, okay, so how's that idea start to kind of connect to actionable results? Then you're going to talk about this issue is significant because what? So you engage on this conversation. You start to capture some of this information. You iterate on it. And finally, you're going to talk about, from this framework, the ideal outcome is what? And you begin to capture this in this idea. So important to start right away by framing up, priming the conversation, and then talking with them, having them think about these statements and how they might finish them. So we're looking at this framing of the idea, this crafting of the framing. Now I want to look at the value plan. And then we're going to look at them in the system here. The value plan, so important. A couple things here. You talk about value up front, not at the end of the project. A lot of people like to do ROI at the end of the, no, we got to talk about value up front because we may need a baseline. We may need to do some measurements of the current state. So you got to start talking up front how we're going to measure value, who's going to measure the value, and what is the value we're looking for. And in a value plan, you can see several components. What are the value drivers? You can have qualitative value drivers, quantitative, you can have many factors, but you got to agree to them up front so you can measure them down the road. Who's the business owner? I used to lead projects, and I would say that was a successful project. We did it. All our green measures, guess what? The business is not using it. No adoption. You know who tells if there's value? That business owner. The business those stakeholders, they're going to understand if there's value. And you're going to finally have plan value. What was that plan value? So these are some of the components you'll see in a value plan. And my last point on value plan, how many times do I see people putting together this thick business case? Oh, goodness. Get the architects involved, get the vendor cost estimates, get all. Guess what? Why are we doing a big business case? And I still don't even know if there's value in the idea or how we're going to measure it. Do not proceed to do a business case. And guess what? How many business cases slide right through? And now I've got a project even. And I still don't know how we're going to capture value or talk about it and measure it. Value plan. Get the engagement up front, and that's where the BRM role in these early conversations makes such a big difference. So now we understand this framework of ideas and the value plan. How do we do this? And so we're going to jump into Get in Sync real quick, and we're moving fast given our time, and just show you a little bit in Get in Sync of how this can work as you think about this. I hope you have a tool because you need something to do this kind of work inside of a system to really frame it up nicely. So I'll have Stuart introduce it, and we'll get into an idea.
Yeah, and again, because we're short on time, we're putting the pedal to the metal here, so we're going to go through this pretty quickly. We can always have a follow-up session, but Get in Sync, it's really about, like I said, clawing back your time, getting everyone, the old story, singing from the same song sheet sort of thing. It's portfolio management, so there's quite a bit in Get in Sync, but today we're just focusing on ideas. We take a different track in terms of how we look at IT. We're always talking in terms of dollars and cents, and we change the conversation from a cost to an investment. We believe IT should be treated treated like an asset that it is. But I am going to jump over to ideas. We have a Kanban board here, and this is just showing you some of the idea intake. Now you're looking at a fictitious company here, this is all demo data. But what we wanted to do is just drive home this whole concept of idea framework and the value plan. And so it's augmented with AI. So you don't have to do a lot of the heavy work. A lot of times, again, back to making your brain sweat, what we have is the framework here that allows AI assist us in this idea. So what am I looking at? Well, I'm looking at employee self-service expense reimbursement. So, we all know about that. So I'm going to ask AI to actually go out and suggest an idea. So AI fetched it, it read this, and then it fetched it, and it's providing in a quick. And again, we're trying to take those meetings down, make them really prime them up and give them that 15-minute explanation as to what this idea is. So, and as you saw, the objectives, this is where the idea framework comes in. So again, I can ask AI to finish these sentences for me. So how might the idea, so that we can, the issue is significant and so forth. Now, what it's done is it's just read this particular phrase. So it's important to prompt it correctly with the idea, but that makes sense anyway, because you want to have a good title to your idea. And so it goes out and actually finishes those sentences for us. The ideal outcome is to have 95% of all employees expense reimbursements processed, yada, yada, yada. You can read. So now, if I don't like that, I can actually edit it, right? So it's a launching point. And that's the same thing with the value plan. I'll turn this over to Kip and let him explain it. I'm going to go ahead and start the AI engine because this takes a little longer because it's thinking more, if there's such a thing.
But this to me is where people used to say, Kip, can we just do this project? Can we just do this, please? Because I would ask them, what's the value? How would we measure it? And they would go, I don't know how we're going to measure this. I don't know what the measures we should be. And so it's not always easy to think about how you're going to measure an idea, how you're going to measure a project. So what I love about what Get in Sync will do is, as Stuart just said, it'll at least prompt you with some ideas, qualitative, quantitative, and just a few, not even a minute there, you're going to get some thoughts on how we might measure an idea that you generated and begin to talk with your business. And each of these columns then are some of those fields that you can have in this file. And you can see lots of fields over here on the right that Stuart's looking at that you could put in this value plan. And I can move these around. And then as Stuart said, it's so easy to use. And then if I don't like one of these, I can click on it. Maybe I don't like that first one. And below, I put in what I want in this value driver. I can update it. You know what? I don't think the plan value is strong enough. Let's add some words here. This, to me, is an engaging conversation you have with the IT, who's acting as the BRM, and the business or the department or municipality leader that you're working with. That's really from an idea to a value. And I make sure we're feeling good here before I move on. So this is kind of just showing you all the things that you can do. You want to have a system, because what I like about having a system is, as we go back here and we look then at the board, now I can move this around, and now I move it because maybe we have good enough the idea, and now I'm going to move it more towards the business case. And what's important is I don't want to work an idea if I already have this idea out there somewhere. So we were able to Google kind of our entire environment, and I could actually see, was there any ideas out there related to employee? And just by typing employee, I can see, well, nope, just one idea there. We've got a couple projects that reference you need to make sure you're doing things of value. And so we just wanted to highlight the value framework, the idea framework, the value plan. Important part of really that whole demand management and the BRM role, the BRM capability, that's what you need to be doing up front. You do not want a lot of other people working on this until we engage in this way. Excellent. So those are a couple key points. And again, we can come back to that. We might have time here at the very end. And again, as Stuart said, we are flying through. But here's the idea. You get the idea, you get the value plan. Guess what? That follows along now. So maybe it's approved. You get the business case, you get it to a project. Your job is never done. You might not do every task. You're not the project manager, but you know what? You're going to ensure that we are tracking value. So that value plan continues to follow with the project. If we would have gone into projects and programs, you would have seen the value plan. There it is, because we need to see where are we on the current value? Do we need to adjust the value and have any actions? And of course, we've already determined, is there a time frame for this? We're going to measure it 6 months post-implementation. We're going to run this report. All of that has been talked about up front, but now you're using it the whole way through in regular reviews. Because how many times are we not celebrating the real value at the end? We do projects, and I was there. I move on to the next project. Let's work with our partners, our stakeholders, our department leaders, municipality leaders, and celebrate the real value of the work we're doing. So we talked quickly about this framework, the value plan, how we're thinking about this. Demand management is critical. It can't just be intake. Let's shape the demand. Let's look at it. So now you may be asking kind of, well, what can I do? What are some things to be thinking about? So we'll just close here, Stu, with a few final thoughts. And then hopefully for you guys, you deserve extra points for sticking around. If you got any questions or things, we can spend a little bit of time talking now.
Yeah, so really what we're trying to say here is use the idea crafting framework. So to make meetings more successful, you're coming in with the idea already partially cooked. For those people that need that more certainty, they can't deal in abstract ideas, they have to deal in concrete thinking. So really that idea framework helps them go, okay. And it moves them from that inconceivable to maybe conceivable, or at least you're not getting thrown out of their office, sort of things like get out of my office. But so anyway, and of course, Kip and I, we would welcome anyone that wants to see a full demo of Get in Sync, of course, and just talk more about how this and leverages and helps BRMs. We also feel that if you want, a lot of people like to do the self-enroll, and you can do that online at getinsync.ca at any time. And then, of course, we're here to help. So run a pilot if you want and that kind of thing. There's our LinkedIn profiles and stuff like that. So we'd welcome any conversations or discussions if you want to pursue this further. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Kip. I don't, Kip, did I miss it?
I just, maybe, Marcel, if you have any questions, we can open up if anything has come in. I'm not sure, but I just want to reinforce. And guys, the way that we in IT manage demand really helps us show up as an opportunity to be partners and peers versus order taker back office kind of mentality. And if we're going to just take requirements and pass it along and have people starting to work on something, you might as well have a shoebox and they just put their ideas in, it gets passed over and somehow it's on the IT portfolio. We have to engage. That's the value we add right up front on the idea, talking about value. And then yes, that PMO will come in, we'll start executing if it's a good thing to be doing. But I think so much happens in this front side of demand management that is so important. And I'm glad that this was the topic to be talking, because there's a lot of, I think, muscles that we should all be building around here. And if there are BRM roles, whether it's a position or someone who's playing that role in this relationship with a stakeholder, they're really at the front line. So be humbly confident as you go into these conversations to help drive that. So we will pause and see if anything came in. Otherwise, we can keep talking as well.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand and I will unlock your microphone and your camera. I don't see any questions in the chat. That's another way. Oh, we have one here from Rob. Does the software have the capability to capture or manage requirements that are adjacent to, but perhaps outside of IT? For example, privacy, accessibility, climate benefits, or elements?
I like that question.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think the thinking is that throughout the actual value plan creation and the idea creation, there are places within that construct to add those pieces, particularly how it interrelates with other assets already in your environment. So it's not, I wouldn't classify it as a requirements gathering tool, but having said that, it's the high level component. So that, if you will, the impact that this idea might have on other in-flight projects, other assets in your environment, that kind of thing. That's where we can see the idea being interconnected to, for example, your business drivers. An idea or a project should support your business drivers and provide it thrust. And so that's where the Get in Sync ends, if you will, from an IT requirements gathering exercise. So hopefully that answered your question, but we can also take that offline and show you the specifics, Kip.
Well, no, I think with Rob, it's a great question, because again, we don't want to be just doing IT for IT's sake, right? How does that connect to some of these things that might be more on the privacy, climate, other things that are impacting the citizens, impacting the municipality, not just maybe the IT, right? So those would come up, as Stuart said, as you're talking the value of this idea. If there's some project over there related to the environment that doesn't have an IT component, you can reference that. We wouldn't be putting that project necessarily in here because it doesn't have maybe an IT application or an IT project, but you definitely want to make sure it's all fitting together. Too many IT projects with no connection to some of the things that you've brought up there, which are really important.
Yeah, I think that helps. And when I was typing the question, I was typing really fast, so I wasn't saying things the way I hope. When I said requirement, I guess what I really meant was how do I capture the elements of those other aspects, particularly in the context of maybe even value, because what I'm mostly interested in is the overall value profile of a body of work, and some of that value will come from IT, perhaps.
That's right.
Perhaps the majority will come from climate, for example. And so how do I capture the complete value story?
And that's where I was going to go, Stuart, in terms of the program kind of drivers here. Yep.
Yeah, so I think where you're going to is like, so for example, if we're looking at a particular thrust, if you will, like improved cash flow forecast, we want to have a driver, we want to maintain cash flow, greater than a ratio of 1.5. So what is supporting that driver? Well, these two ideas have been tagged to that. These three projects have been tagged to that. And you can even go farther as you drill down the rabbit hole, and I'm hoping I'm answering your question. You can actually go in and see what project elements are in flight. So again, this goes back to the application side. So the impact overall of that particular thrust, if you will, that particular driver. So hopefully that's answered your question.
Yeah, well,
the idea is like, go ahead.
But no, I think, Rob, you were getting to these kind of drivers because a program might have some IT components and other components. This would flag how we're fitting to drive some bigger drivers for the municipality, for the department. And so that's kind of how we would try to do it. I think what you were discussing. Yeah.
Right, and I think that what you just demonstrated would also be a way to demonstrate how a given idea or a body of work aligns to strategic priorities or strat plan programs or what have you. Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Right.
So if the project is orphaned and it doesn't align to one of these things, then maybe it's a pet project. Maybe it's not providing.
Yeah, stop doing it.
Yeah, you should stop doing it. Yeah, exactly. And that happens with ideas too. So you're trying to say, okay, how does this idea move our strategic plan. If we have a 5-year city municipality strategic plan, where does it fit? And that way that you can kind of suss out some of those, like I say, pet projects or zombie projects that come about.
And it may not be clear right away, right? But at least we'll drive that conversation to what you're bringing up, Rob, of we should probably ask that question. And so minimally, we should talk that, right? And that's what that idea framework and that's what that value you begin to do. Not when, well, we did the project, so how'd it go? Well, I think it fits to what we just been doing. No. Good to talk this up front so the expectations are all aligned together, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And again, this then fits back into a portfolio. So if you're actually finance and you're looking at your own little world and back to the brains thinking about my motive, what am I doing here? So you're always trying to zero in on your area. So those things then are aligned within your portfolio. So what projects do I have on the go for that specific unit? What ideas do I have on the go? So again, these are all interconnected. So then you're now keeping the accountability into that defined space. And then you can have more of those conversations with folks as to how you're going to move that particular idea forward. When I was in that BRM space, I was like, okay, I'm going in and I'm meeting with Rick. what has he got on the plate? What's he going to talk to me about? I don't want to get blindsided, so I have at least some of the thinking about the ideas. Because we suffered from hallway requirements, right? I'd be walking down the hall, and Rick would say, hey, by the way, can you help me with so and so? And you kind of like, oh yeah, sure. And then you keep going. 3 weeks later, he's like, where's that project I told you about? And all when we were walking down the hall, right? So, the idea is if it's not in Get in Sync, it doesn't exist. Let's have a structured way in which to deal with these innovative ideas, right? Because that's what we're suffering. If we don't take in the ideas, we might miss something, an opportunity. And the other thing is, if we decide not to do it, we say, well, it's on the list. It's scheduled for 5 years. You know what I mean? Like we've already dealt with it, and so then the business knows, or the people know that it's not something that's a priority. And sorry, Kip, go ahead.
Stuart and Kip, there's another question here. From Darren Penner. You're enabled, by the way, Darren, if you want to speak this instead of me reading it. But it says, I can see this as being very helpful for helping to develop and analyze business cases. Can we sort initiatives based on the specific driver for a comparative analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of things that you can do. You can go into here and you can look at the various different types. And this is all configurable, so you can do whatever you like in that regard. So if you wanted to see all the ones that are going to give you the growth or develop something, and the Kanban board is just one view. You can go into a grid view. You can just pull this up, and it works like Excel. So you can just cut and slice. You can just see what this project manager is working on, and that's throughout the entire system. So you can basically build things right from the dashboard. Like I say, it's more XLS, and then you can see your drivers here. And again, you could search on that or dice and slice the data.
What we can talk about is, okay, I've got several ideas, maybe even move to business cases. I got to make some decisions. How could I look at them and compare them in terms of the value that each of them are providing? Is there some business drivers that are higher or lower on this idea than the other ones? So comparing across ideas, comparing across proposals, even as the committee or board's deciding, well, let's do this one. And the answer is, I think, Darren, you bet. You can use this to look at and compare different ideas in terms of the value, and there's probably different ways to slice and dice that at the idea level. It might be even in the analytics section, Stuart, in terms of here's all the value areas. How do I compare them so I can make some decisions? I think that's what he's also asking, because it is helpful, because I typically only got a certain amount of money and a certain amount of people. So I got to start making some decisions on what I'm going to be working on, right? And I think that's a good question, Darren.
Okay, we have another question here from Sheila Nussik. Your microphone is enabled, if you will.
Hi. I was just wondering, do you have any advice or suggestions when some of your pinch points aren't project work? Like there's a lot of work that needs to happen that's not a formal project. Like it's the death by 1,000 cuts kind of on our resources. So how do you do demand shaping for things that are smaller than a project?
That's real good. Yeah, and I think as you guys probably have, typically there's like a threshold, right? Or there's something like, there's something that's guiding, all right, here's when you need to put in an idea and generate a business case. Then there's all the stuff that you're talking, right? Like just get it done. It's a part of the service. It's a part of the product. And so we do, that's where Stuart was referencing, under applications and IT services, how we're managing all of the applications, all of the IT services, who's responsible for those. That's where you would kind of be working on as an application owner, some of that kind of work. So I'll let Stuart share a little bit what he's showing here, but then maybe Stuart, you could talk about just the normal IT stuff, not just ideas. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we try to do, and I know it's very difficult because there's always, like Kip mentioned, the project threshold. But again, back to that, if it's not in Get in Sync, it doesn't exist. So the intention is to try and keep those smaller projects like the old, sand, pebbles, rocks, boulders. But it's really in terms of trying to keep them in here. And then you would just assess it, what the size of it is. Even though you might not, like the label projects has different indications in various different organizations. But if you're working on it, it's kind of a project. So you can always just have it in a size smaller, right? Like, and categorize it that way. And again, it's on the board, because if you're trying to address those smaller projects, they're always important to keep in the line of sight. And so we would suggest to put them in here, but I get it. Some thresholds would prohibit that. But that would be our suggestion.
Thank you.
Yeah, you would see in kind of how you're just managing applications and services, you're constantly going to be looking at your life cycle. You know, you need to kind of be managing that to know, I need to upgrade this, I need to modernize it, you know, I need to turn this one off. So there's all those things that you could be looking at to kind of create some of that that follow-up there.
And just to make sure that I'm answering the question, I mean, we want to make sure there's a distinction between a ticket and an idea. You know, sometimes the ticket system gets inundated with ideas when that, you know, and they don't get treated. And so, but that's the only place people have ability to have intake. So what we're saying is, like, get those tickets out and put them in to get in sync. There should be that process that helps shape demand. If your ticketing system is inundated with ideas, that's showing kind of a sign that you need a process to validate and vet those.
Yeah, and that's exactly where we're struggling right now, is that area of work where it's bigger than a ticket, but it's smaller than a project.
Yeah.
Like, it requires coordination work. And I think especially when we like hit some of those other touch points, right? Oh, you need to talk about to privacy, you need to do a cyber assessment, you need to do a bunch of work. But it's not enough work to warrant a full on business case and project.
Correct.
But it still has to pass around, and it's not a ticket, right? Like,
Right.
Well, just maybe one more comment on this, because it is a very, we all know exactly what you're talking, and many times, and you can configure Get in Sync to do this, but there's certain parts of the process that we'll do for everything, but in this case, you don't need to do that, because that's like the business case. But we want to see this step and this step, but we don't need to see this and this and this, right? So there's ways to kind of think about, you don't have to be, everything is treated the same, but there's aspects of everything we want to treat the same. So that's a little bit of a play there too.
Yeah, and we're running out of time, so I just want to be mindful. And again, we welcome folks to reach out, and these are awesome questions. And so there are, Get in Sync's configurable so that we can make it work in your environment in the best way possible, sort of thing. So
let's be strategic in the way we manage demand. I mean, it is the first moment of truth sometimes for IT, is how we do this discussion on ideas, how we really manage the demand. Let's make sure we're doing things in IT of the highest value. That's really what we're all about. I know that's what we're all about. So, but thanks for the time.
Okay. Well, we started late, but maybe we can finish on time.
All right. Thank you, Kip and Stuart. That was wonderful. We might have to, invite you back. I would love to. You didn't touch on this at all. Your application portfolio management side of the solution, and that's another way to get the discussion going with your clients about where potential investments could come in the role of a BRM. I find this fascinating, and I've been living by this for many years. It's super helpful and gets you to the table, I would say, is what it does for you. So
yeah.
We'd welcome
thank you so much.
An opportunity to come back, and we could change the topic to application portfolio management for sure.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.